Summary permissions are calculated by Easy Security for many different things in the application. It's a way of getting the total permission based on all the things the user have access for. We also have a function called permissions from, basically allowing a way of figuring out why is that permission in the user's permission sets in here. We also have a way of using summary permissions and only calculate the necessary one for segregation of duty, or marking the one for segregation of duties in here. I'm in the Easy Security company in here, and I want to take a look at summary permission. This one is the default setup right now, and if I update a login like Susan down here, I'll see I get 90 summary permission calculated in here. The summary permission are basically the total permission the user have for a company, for a table or an object, and it's a very good way of auditing that everything is correct with the permissions in here. We also have this assigned from, so as I actually look at that one, I can see that for Susan it was in Kronos Europe assigned from sales receivable as part of the group operations or company group, and it also came from purchase payables with the complete read access in here. So this one allows me to see all the things where it's coming from in here, and both for the grouping, the individual permission set, and for the company or the group of companies that it was assigned as in here. We also have a where used, so if you actually want to look the whole other way around the system, we can now look at all the places where the vendor ledger entry is actually used in here, and I can see there's 118 places where it's used in permissions, and I can see the level for each individual permission set and things like that one in here. I can look at relations, that is the output of the source code analyzer, and again look at all the relations for that table, but also where it's used as relation. That is a lot more useful in many ways. This one would be a great way of going in and say, oh, is that where it is? I want to add them to limited access, for example, using the object level security, or maybe the quick security in here to hide that object for people. The summary permission by default are only calculated for the users. We have a function where we can actually calculate summary permissions for everything. We can calculate it for permission sets, groups, recordings, also the live users and the live permission sets in here. So if I check all these ones in here, I will now update my summary permission for all these places again in here. Again, I only have a limited list right now that I'm actually looking at, but in this case I'm actually updating all the places where this is being used in here. As you can see, it takes a while. It's quite an expensive calculation. That's why these things don't happen automatically in here. But I can now go into my permissions group, like this customer service, for example, and look at my summary permissions in here. And I can see all the access to both data, but also to objects in here. And the objects that are in the list is the one that I actually have added with object level access for the other one. We can also look at the live data. So if we look at the users, I can see the summary permissions here for Susan, and that's typically what the auditors care a lot more about. What is the live permissions? I don't want to see all this other data. I just want to see what is the user's actual access out there. There's a couple of things in here. Right now, I actually went and looked at my summary permission, but I only saw certain tables in here. The reason for that is that I have not checked this field include all summary permission, and that means only tables or only objects and tables that are included in the object properties with either object level security, segregation of duty, or limited license objects is actually being included in here. One of the things you could do is saying, my auditors, they really only care about the GL entries, customer ledger, vendor, and they care about the posted tables in here. My sales shipment header, invoice header, credit memo, and the same for purchase down here. But it could also be that they actually wanted the customer, and it's currently not in a list, so I'm going to add my customer table, being 18 in here. And I want to add it for segregation of duty level calculations also. And I want to add my vendor. And I want to add my item in here. That is 27. So now I added some with segregation of duties in here. If I now go back and calculate my summary permissions again, these tables of course will be included in here in the summary permissions also. So now I can go look at my permission groups and look at my summary permissions for customer service, and I'll be able to see my access for modifying customers also in here, and vendor and items and so on, and the level of access. I could go in and say, okay, let's filter on only the one I actually want for segregation of duties. And now I see only those ones that my auditors care about in here. I could also go in and say, yeah, I want to, instead of looking at permission groups, I want to look at users, but I don't want to look at any specific user. And now I see everything by the user inside the database in here. One thing to be aware of is you probably need to add 0 in here, because that permission for people having super access is not included in here. It do the detailed level, and then you have to always add the 0 if necessary. So I added more tables in here, and the other thing I can do is actually I can include all summary permission. There's over 6,000 objects in NAV with data and objects. Now it will calculate summary permission for everything in here. And that means even if I now update a single login, it's actually going to be quite time consuming, because the summary permissions is going to be thousands of them in here. So as you typically add that field, you should always check the one that follows with it to manually update summary permission. It means that none of this one is being calculated automatically. You could also go do this one when the auditors wanted the information, calculate it for everything, and then as the auditors have got the information they wanted, you can put them back to how they used to be in here. But now with the manual check, I'll see that no summary permissions were calculated. They still sit here, but that's because they're now based on the last calculation. And I can now go in and say, okay, let's update the summary permissions for everything. And this one is a time-consuming process, because it basically goes through everything and inserts hundreds and thousands of records for each individual user or group and things like that one in here. But it allows you to have a complete set of summary permission covering everything in here. It's also calculating for the live in here, and I would now be able to go to the live part of this one for my users, and for John, for example, or Susan down here. Look at the summary permission, and there will be thousands of permissions in here, but a complete calculation of what is the access based on per table, per company, or even for objects down here. If I go down, I'll see there's probably will be access for each individual code unit, which one they can execute and which one they cannot execute, and so on.